We often find ourselves searching for meaning in the grand achievements of life, the awards, the milestones, the moments of recognition that seem to justify our existence. But what if meaning isn't hidden in those monumental victories? What if it quietly resides in the simple, almost unnoticed steps we take every day? Viktor Frankl believed that meaning is not something we invent, but something we discover, and that discovery happens not in the future, but right here in the present moment. It happens when we choose to act even in the face of suffering or uncertainty. A single word spoken in kindness, a decision to keep going when giving up seems easier, or even just the act of showing up. These are all small steps toward meaning. They may not look like much from the outside, but they carry a weight that only the soul can measure. We must learn to recognize the value in what seems insignificant, because nothing is insignificant when it is done with intention. In the darkest hours of life, the human spirit doesn't crave comfort. It craves meaning, and in those moments meaning doesn't come as a lightning bolt from the heavens. It arrives slowly, patiently, through our smallest acts. Imagine a person who has lost everything: status, family, health. What remains for them to hold on to? The power to choose one's attitude in the face of suffering. The ability to take one step forward, no matter how painful or uncertain. That step is not just movement, it's a declaration: I am still here, I still matter. In this act, the person reclaims their humanity. They remind themselves, and the world, that even when stripped of everything, they are not stripped of meaning. That truth is what carried Frankl through the concentration camps. That truth is what can carry any of us through the silent suffering of daily life. The modern world convinces us that if we are not moving fast, we are failing. That unless we're making bold, visible strides, we are being left behind. But the soul does not grow in leaps. It grows in patience, in persistence, in presence. A small step taken consciously, even if it leads nowhere immediately, is not wasted. It is a seed planted in the soil of tomorrow's transformation. We must unlearn the belief that we need to be extraordinary to live a life of meaning. Sometimes it is enough to just be faithful to our values, to our relationships, to the quiet voice within. That faithfulness is expressed through small actions: making the bed when depressed, listening fully when distracted, choosing honesty when it's easier to lie. These acts do not demand applause. They demand presence. And in presence we uncover meaning. Many people wait for clarity before they act. They wait for motivation, for the perfect opportunity, for a sign. But clarity often follows action, not the other way around. The first step is rarely full of certainty, it is usually full of doubt. Yet in taking that step, the fog begins to lift. What was once hidden becomes visible, not because the world changed, but because you changed your relationship to it. The simple act of doing something, anything, becomes the pivot around which your life can turn. It reminds you that you are not helpless, that you still have agency. This is the gift of the small step. It does not ask for perfection, only for movement. One word, one choice, one breath, that is how meaning enters the room. Quietly, faithfully, without ceremony. There is something sacred in repetition. Doing the same small thing day after day might seem pointless, but it is within repetition that meaning often reveals itself. A mother preparing meals, a teacher showing up for students, a man rising every morning to care for a sick parent. These acts don't make headlines, but they shape lives. They are grounded not in fleeting passion, but in steady purpose. And in each repetition, the person reaffirms what matters most. They say with their actions, "This is who I am, this is what I value," There is power in this, not the power to control life, but the power to meet life with courage and grace. Frankl taught us that even when the what of life is taken from us, we still possess the freedom to choose the how. And often, that how is expressed in small, daily choices. In our search for fulfillment, we often overlook the power of attention. Where your attention goes, your life follows. And if your attention is rooted in the present, even the smallest step becomes meaningful. Washing the dishes, walking the dog, writing one honest sentence in a journal. These are not chores. They are spiritual practices when done with intention. They remind you that life is not something waiting for you at the end of a long road. Life is happening now, and meaning is embedded in your engagement with it. You do not need to escape your routine to find purpose. You need only to enter into it more deeply, to feel the water on your hands, the sound of footsteps on the street, the rhythm of your own breath. When you are fully present, nothing is too small to matter. Sometimes the smallest step is simply refusing to give in to despair. When nothing makes sense, and the weight of existence feels unbearable, choosing to hold on is itself an act of meaning. Not because you have found the answer, but because you are still willing to ask the question. This is not weakness. It is resilience. It is the quiet strength of someone who, though bruised by life, still dares to believe that there is something worth discovering. Frankl described how, in the camps, men would give their last piece of bread to another. That gesture, so small, held the weight of eternity. It said, "You matter, I matter, life still matters." The step doesn't need to be big. It only needs to be real. In a society obsessed with outcomes, we have forgotten how to value effort. We chase results, but it is the process that shapes us. The person who trains daily without recognition, the artist who creates despite rejection, the child who tries again after failing. These are not stories of delay. They are stories of becoming. And in that becoming, each step holds its own dignity. Viktor Frankl believed that meaning could not be pursued like pleasure or success. It must ensue. It emerges not when we seek it directly, but when we give ourselves fully to what lies before us. That's the paradox. By surrendering to the small task at hand, we find something far greater. We find a life that is not only bearable but beautiful. The journey toward meaning is not paved with certainty, it is paved with commitment, not the loud kind, declared in resolutions and slogans, but the quiet kind, lived in action. The commitment to rise when it's easier to stay down, to listen when it's easier to speak, to move forward when fear whispers, "Stay here." Every time you honor that commitment, you reinforce your relationship with life. You tell yourself that you are not passive, that you are a participant in your own story. Even if the path is unclear, your movement gives it shape. The step may be small, but the soul behind it is immense. And it is in this contrast, the smallness of the act and the largeness of its meaning, that we begin to see the true power of small steps. When a person is suffering deeply, silently, it can feel as though the world has gone deaf to their pain. It's easy to believe that unless our healing is grand or visible, it doesn't count. But Viktor Frankl teaches us otherwise. In the concentration camps, he witnessed the profound dignity that could be preserved in the most hopeless conditions. It was not the powerful who survived, it was often those who found the smallest thread of meaning to hold on to. And sometimes that meaning came in the form of a simple step forward, a whisper of resistance in the form of a decision, "I will not be reduced to my suffering." That is not denial, it is defiance, not defiance of reality, but defiance of despair. Every small act of movement in darkness is a protest against meaninglessness. That is where human dignity is reclaimed. We tend to think that suffering strips us of everything, but that's not entirely true. It may strip us of our possessions, our health, or our roles in society, but it cannot take our capacity to choose. Frankl's core insight was that there is always a space between what happens to us and how we respond. In that space lies our last human freedom, the freedom to choose our attitude, and when you are buried under pain, your attitude may not roar. It may only whisper, but even a whisper can change your life. To say, "I will take one step, even if I am broken," is to affirm your identity beyond your pain. That step might be invisible to others, but to you it is everything. You are choosing to be the author of your own suffering, not its victim. That choice is where dignity returns. Suffering, left unanswered, can feel like a void, but the moment you take a step, however uncertain, you place meaning into that void. You declare that this suffering will not be wasted, that you will, in your own time, use it to shape something real. This is not romanticizing pain. It is honoring the truth that pain, when met with purpose, transforms. You don't need to know the full story of why you suffer to begin writing your response to it. One small action, a conversation, a journal entry, a silent prayer, and become a turning point. Not because the suffering ends, but because you begin to move with it instead of being crushed beneath it. And this is the power of small steps. They don't need to solve everything. They just need to keep you human. People often wait for strength before they move, but movement creates strength. When you're at your lowest, the idea of doing something, anything, can feel impossible. Yet that's exactly when the smallest act becomes most meaningful. It's not just movement, it's resistance. When you stand up to your own pain, even if your body shakes and your heart doubts, you are standing up for something more than survival. You are standing up for the idea that your life still matters, that you are more than your suffering. The beauty of this step is that it doesn't require anyone's permission. You don't have to wait to be fixed to begin moving. That first trembling step is already a restoration of power, and with each step after, dignity grows stronger. Often we equate dignity with control, but Frankl showed us that dignity is not found in controlling circumstances. It is found in how we respond when we can't. In the camps, men who had lost everything still chose to give away their last piece of bread. What can possibly explain such a choice? It wasn't logic, it was meaning. It was a final stand to say, even now I can still give. I can still choose. That is the deepest expression of human freedom. To love when you're unloved, to give when you have nothing left, to rise when no one is watching. This isn't about being heroic. It's about being deeply, profoundly human. And often, being human means taking a small, defiant step toward the light, even when everything around you screams darkness. It's tempting to believe that unless our efforts are big, they don't count. But meaning is not measured by size. It is measured by sincerity, the quiet decision to breathe through pain, to write when your heart is heavy, to care for someone else while your world is crumbling. These are not small acts. They are lifelines. They reconnect you to your own humanity, and in reconnecting, you find that you are not alone. Others have walked through their own fires, taking their own small steps, and their paths echo yours. Dignity is not a solitary crown, it's a shared flame passed quietly from one person to another, and when you take that next step, no matter how small, you become part of that lineage. You carry something forward that pain could not extinguish. Pain isolates. It convinces you that you are no longer worthy of joy or peace or even attention, but the moment you take a step forward, especially when no one sees it, you re-enter life, you say, I still belong here. That step might be as simple as brushing your teeth or opening the window. These are not acts of routine. They are statements of existence. They affirm that even now you are still trying, still choosing, and that choice connects you to everything, to other people, to purpose, to the future. Frankl's insight was that meaning is what saves us, not comfort, not pleasure, not distraction. And meaning is born in the exact moment you dare to move forward when everything tells you not to. That is how suffering is answered. That is how dignity is rebuilt. There is a deep silence in suffering, a silence that can feel like abandonment, but even in that silence your actions speak. Every time you take a small step, you write a sentence into your story that says, I am not finished yet. This isn't about optimism or false hope. It's about realism with courage. To suffer and still choose to live is the most honest thing a person can do. It does not deny the pain it carries it, but it carries it towards something. Each step becomes a testimony that suffering will not have the final word, and with each step, no matter how slow or painful, you return to yourself. You recover what the pain tried to erase, your voice, your presence, your worth. And that is where dignity is born again. You don't need a dramatic transformation to reclaim your power. You don't need to change your entire life overnight. All you need is a moment of willingness, a quiet, honest step forward. That step might not look like much to anyone else, but to you it's a revolution. It's a choice to participate in life again, to say, I may be wounded, but I am not defeated. And that declaration, even if whispered only to yourself, changes everything. It reclaims territory that pain had occupied. It turns suffering into a field where meaning can take root. And over time, those small steps accumulate. They build a path made not of victory, but of value, of love, of courage, and it all begins with the simplest, most powerful step. To keep going. Freedom is often misunderstood. People think of it as the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want. But Viktor Frankl taught us that true freedom is something much deeper. It is the freedom to choose our response no matter the situation. You might be imprisoned by your circumstances, silenced by loss, or paralyzed by fear. But there is always one thing that cannot be taken from you, your inner decision. That space between what happens to you and how you respond is sacred. It is where your humanity lives. In that space you are not a victim of life. You are a participant in it. You may not control the events of your day, but you control the posture of your soul. And in that quiet choice to respond with courage, hope, or grace, freedom is born. Most people search for control because they believe it will bring them peace. But peace does not come from control. It comes from alignment with your inner values. And when everything around you feels chaotic, your ability to choose how to respond is a reminder that you are not powerless. This response may be small. It may be a breath instead of a scream, or a moment of stillness instead of collapse. But it is a powerful declaration that you are not your circumstances. You are the awareness behind them, the soul that still chooses. In that moment, you stop reacting and start living intentionally. This is not about denying pain, it's about transforming it. By responding with meaning even to suffering, you rise above it. That is what Frankl meant by the last of human freedoms. Imagine being in a situation where everything is stripped away. Comfort, security, even hope. What remains? Only the space inside you where choice still lives. That's the space Frankl discovered in the camps, surrounded by death, fear, and cruelty. He realized he still had the power to respond with love, compassion, or dignity, and that response, no matter how small, gave him a reason to keep going. It was not the absence of pain that gave him strength, but the presence of meaning in how he faced it. This truth is available to all of us. In daily frustrations, in quiet griefs, in overwhelming confusion, we still hold that space. And in that space, even the smallest response becomes an act of freedom. A step away from despair, and a step toward meaning. Many of us wait for better conditions to respond with our best selves. We say, when things calm down, I'll be more kind, or once I feel stronger, I'll take action. But freedom does not wait. Freedom acts now in the middle of the storm. It whispers, even here I can choose. You might not choose the pain, but you can choose the purpose behind how you carry it. That's the moment your life starts to shift. The world may not change around you, but your experience of it will, and that changes everything. Your response becomes your identity, and your identity becomes your path. You begin to realize that freedom is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of awareness and action within difficulty. It's there, in that space, that power lives. Our responses shape who we become. Every time we choose patience instead of anger, hope instead of resignation, forgiveness instead of bitterness, we redefine ourselves. These choices may seem small, almost invisible, but they shape the soul. They build character not in bursts, but in layers. The freedom to respond does not need a platform or audience. It needs only your willingness to engage with life as it is. And when you do that, when you meet life on its own terms and still choose to bring meaning, you become unshakable. Not because life becomes easier, but because you have become stronger. Frankl's message wasn't about escaping life's suffering, but about engaging with it in a way that preserves your inner freedom. In each response, you are shaping the story of your life. Sometimes we believe we have no choice left. The situation feels so overwhelming that response seems impossible. But even then, a response still exists. Maybe it's not bold or dramatic. Maybe it's simply the refusal to give up. Maybe it's choosing not to lash out, or simply breathing, holding on for one more hour. These choices may not feel heroic, but they are. They are deeply human, and in those quiet moments of restraint, of choosing not to collapse into despair, you find a deeper form of strength. Frankl observed that even in the camps, some people could choose to maintain a kind word, a gentle act. They were not free on the outside, but entirely free on the inside. That is what we all have access to, the ability to respond from the best in us, even when surrounded by the worst. It is easy to believe we are defined by what happens to us. Trauma, failure, rejection, all these things mark us, but they do not complete us. What completes us is what we choose to do next. That choice may not be loud. It may not come with clarity or certainty, but even the smallest decision to move forward, to stay open, or to reach out becomes a way of reclaiming the story. Our freedom lies not in denying what happened, but in writing what comes after. In that freedom, we are no longer just survivors. We become creators, creators of new meaning, new ways of being, and new possibilities. And it all begins in that hidden moment between pain and response, where we decide, I will not let this define me. I will define my response to it. The world cannot always see the responses we make, but that doesn't make them less powerful. In fact, the quietest responses often carry the most meaning. A father choosing to be gentle with his children despite the weight of stress. A woman choosing to smile even when her heart is breaking. A young person choosing to keep studying even when they feel hopeless. These acts don't scream for attention, but they echo with purpose. They are examples of the freedom Frankl spoke about. The freedom to create light in darkness, to respond with soul even when the world seems empty. These are not just acts of survival, they are acts of meaning, and they become the foundation of a life that no hardship can take away. To live is to respond. We are always responding to thoughts, to others, to situations, but the difference lies in whether we respond with intention or reaction. Intention transforms, it says, I see what's happening, and I choose how to meet it. This is where freedom becomes practice. You start noticing the space between the trigger and your response, and instead of collapsing into patterns, you make a conscious choice. Maybe the choice is to speak gently, maybe it's to stay silent, maybe it's to cry instead of shut down. Whatever it is, it becomes a door to freedom. Not freedom from the world, but freedom within it. And through these choices, we come home to ourselves. We remember that we are not puppets of circumstance, but stewards of response. You don't need to wait for life to be perfect to reclaim your power. Every moment gives you a chance to respond differently. Maybe yesterday you reacted with fear, but today you respond with curiosity. Maybe you once shut down, but now you reach out. These shifts are subtle, but they change the entire trajectory of your life. Frankl believed that man's deepest calling is to find meaning, and meaning is not found in comfort or ease, it's discovered in the choices we make when things are hardest. The ability to respond with grace, with purpose, with courage, this is the mark of freedom. It is a kind of quiet rebellion against hopelessness, and in that rebellion we become who we truly are, not products of what has happened, but authors of what can still be. We often dream of reaching great heights, of becoming someone significant, of changing our lives dramatically, but we forget where real transformation begins. It does not begin with a leap, it begins with a step. A single, ordinary, almost invisible step. Viktor Frankl reminds us that even in the smallest actions we express something meaningful about who we are. When life feels overwhelming and everything ahead looks uncertain, the mind wants to freeze or run. But taking one small action disrupts that paralysis. It introduces movement back into our life, not because it changes everything at once, but because it changes the direction we're facing. It reminds us that progress doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to begin, and in that beginning a new future starts to unfold. Many people wait for motivation before acting. They wait to feel strong, inspired, or certain. But motivation is not the starting point. It's often the result. When you take a step, no matter how small, you activate something within yourself. You wake up your will. You signal to your soul that you're not giving in. Even a simple task, like making your bed, going for a short walk, or writing a single sentence, can become a moment of renewal. These actions seem small on the surface, but beneath them is a declaration, I'm still here, I'm still trying. That is how change begins, not with clarity or confidence, but with courage, and every step forward becomes a seed of momentum, planting belief in the soil of your spirit. Soon, those small actions become a rhythm that pulls you forward. There is a deceptive power in consistency. A single action done once may not seem like much, but repeated day after day, it becomes a structure, something solid to stand on. Frankl believed in the importance of meaning through action, and even the smallest rituals can ground us in purpose. When you do something meaningful, even briefly, your day shifts, your inner world shifts. You're no longer floating or stuck. You are building something, and what you build begins to shape you. If you choose small steps that align with who you want to become, then day by day you grow into that person. You don't have to rush. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to stay present to the power of repetition, because meaning is not found in rare events. It is cultivated through repeated intention. There's a quiet discipline in taking small steps, especially when no one is watching. These are the moments where integrity grows. You do what you say you'll do. You follow through, not because of applause, but because it matters to you. This creates trust, not just with others, but with yourself. You begin to believe your own promises again, and that is how you recover self-respect. Small steps, taken consistently, begin to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. You no longer feel like a stranger to your own values. You begin to embody them. There is strength in this alignment, a quiet confidence that can't be shaken by setbacks, because it was built, not borrowed. Step by step, you're becoming whole again. Small steps are also the most forgiving kind. They don't require perfection or brilliance. They don't demand that you get everything right. They just ask that you show up, that you begin again, that you give today a chance, even if yesterday was hard. This is how self-compassion grows, not through grand gestures, but through daily grace, through understanding that failure is not the end, but part of the rhythm. Frankl's message wasn't about never falling. It was about how we rise, and rising doesn't need to be dramatic. It can be quiet, slow, gentle. It can be a whisper that says, try again. And in honoring that whisper, you create space for healing, for strength, and for a return to purpose. Step by small step, you come back to life. There is beauty in starting where you are. You don't need to wait for the perfect mood, the perfect plan, or the perfect opportunity. The perfect time is now. This moment, exactly as it is. If your heart is heavy, bring it with you. If your mind is scattered, begin anyway. The power of small steps is that they don't ask for your best. They simply ask for your presence. And when you show up, something shifts. You begin to carry yourself differently. You begin to engage with life, not from a place of fear, but from a place of choice. And even the smallest choice made in alignment with meaning becomes a form of freedom. You don't need to know where the road leads. You just need to take the next right step, and let that be enough for now. One of the greatest obstacles to progress is the belief that we are too far gone, that it's too late, or we've failed too often. But small steps are the antidote to that lie, because no matter how lost you feel, one step puts you back on the path. Frankl would say that meaning is always possible, even in the darkest moments. That is not a fantasy. It's a challenge. It dares us to act as if life still holds value, even when we don't feel it yet, and the act itself becomes the evidence. Each step is proof that you're still reaching for something more, that you haven't given up on yourself. You don't need to believe fully. You just need to move faithfully, and in that motion, belief begins to return. There's a quiet strength in choosing effort over ease, in doing what's meaningful, not just what's comfortable. Small steps often require sacrifice. They ask us to let go of distraction, to resist avoidance, to face discomfort. But what we gain in return is far more powerful. We gain a life that reflects our deepest values. We gain momentum that lasts beyond moods. We gain a relationship with ourselves that is built on action, not just intention. This is what Frankl meant by responsibility, the idea that we are each responsible for the meaning we create. And we create it not all at once, but through each step, each moment, each choice. When we act with purpose, we become participants in our own lives again, not observers, not victims, creators, sometimes the smallest step is simply the refusal to quit. It's not glamorous, it's not a breakthrough, it's just saying, not today, and not today, I won't give in to despair, not today, I won't let fear stop me, not today, I won't forget that I still have something to give. These decisions seem insignificant, but they form the backbone of resilience. Frankl's life was a testament to this truth. He endured the unthinkable not through heroic leaps, but through a relentless commitment to meaning. And you can do the same, not by being perfect, not by knowing all the answers, but by waking up, standing up, and stepping forward. Just once more, that is the real power of small steps. They keep you connected to hope, even when everything feels uncertain. Transformation doesn't need to be loud to be real. It doesn't need to be visible to be valid. Some of the most profound changes happen quietly, in the privacy of your own effort. Small steps don't look like much from the outside, but on the inside they rebuild you. They restore confidence, piece by piece. They reconnect you with your values. They make it possible to look in the mirror and feel proud, not because you've arrived, but because you are showing up day by day, moment by moment, choosing to move toward meaning no matter how slowly. Frankl believed that man's deepest longing is not comfort, but purpose, and purpose is built, not found, in these small, courageous acts. And those acts, repeated, create a life of depth, truth, and quiet power. We live in a world that often glorifies the big win, the overnight success, the dramatic transformation, the viral breakthrough. But Viktor Frankl's wisdom gently reminds us that the deepest kind of strength is built not in leaps, but in steps, and not even large ones, just small, quiet, faithful ones. When we look back on the moments that truly shaped us, we often realize they weren't loud or spectacular. They were the days we chose not to quit, the mornings we got out of bed when it felt impossible, the nights we kept hope alive even in silence. These were the victories that no one saw, but they were the foundation for everything that followed. The power of small steps lies not just in progress, it lies in presence, in choosing to meet life exactly where you are, without needing to fix it all at once. You may not always feel strong, but the act of showing up in the middle of your mess is strength. You may not feel hopeful, but the decision to take one step forward is an act of hope. Frankl believed that life's deepest meaning could be found even in suffering, not by erasing the pain, but by responding to it with intention. And that response often begins with something as simple as deciding, I will try. You don't need to have it all figured out to take a step. In fact, clarity is often the result of action, not the prerequisite for it. With each step you start to see more, you start to understand more, you learn what helps and what heals, you learn what matters and what doesn't, and slowly you begin to build a life that reflects your truth, not someone else's version of success, but your own definition of meaning. Small steps become a compass, guiding you toward the person you were meant to be, and over time they add up, not just to progress, but to transformation. No matter where you are right now, your next step is enough. It doesn't need to impress anyone, it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be real. If you're tired, take a gentle step. If you're afraid, take a shaky one. If you've fallen, rise and take a humble step. But take it, and keep taking it. Frankl taught us that even in the darkest conditions, life asks something of us. It asks us to respond, to participate, to say yes, again and again. And every time we say yes with our actions, our breath, our will, we affirm that our life still holds meaning. So don't wait for the big moment, begin with the small one. Let your steps, however quiet, become your way of saying, I am not done. Let them be your protest against despair, your answer to suffering, your expression of faith. Because, in the end, it is not the size of your steps that defines you, it is the heart behind them, and when that heart beats with courage, purpose, and meaning, even the smallest step becomes a sacred act.